So if you want to really think about the concept of organizational culture, I think it's easiest to go home in our minds and think about the way we were raised. If you think about how you learned what's right and wrong, what's acceptable behavior, what do we value, what are our belief systems, all of these behavioral standards that we learned from our families became just how we do things. It wasn't questioned. And when you think about culture in organizations, it's exactly the same thing. The family we create are the people that we allow to come into the organization. And when that organization feels like family, you get that positive outcome that everybody does love coming to work because it feels so friendly and happy to be there. When we are leaders who empower our teams, who bring out the best in our teams, that's when we're going to get the most authentic and consistent customer experiences. So if you want to maintain consistency in your customer experience standards, in your employee experience standards, the only way you will get that is by actively managing them, continuing to teach, coach, reprimand, reward, recognize behavior. You have to be on top of it. Over and over again, in every organization where I work, I see that leadership makes or breaks a customer experience. Leaders are responsible for setting the tone in the work environment, and they're responsible for setting clear expectations and holding people accountable to them. And without that leadership, it's really hard to create a great customer experience. When I wrote my dissertation, I really believed that the core competence of this organization was in hiring. That what they did so well was bringing in the right people, and then the rest just kind of took care of itself. But in 2009, we had a very interesting natural experiment that occurred that proved me wrong. What happened was that in 2009, we opened 4 concessions at Citi Field, where the New York City Mets play. And because a large food service provider already had a contract with the Mets, we were going to have to use their employees in our 4 concessions. At that time, I was director of culture and learning for Danny's restaurants, and I was a little freaked out by this idea. And so we went to a meeting with the Mets, and we were able to negotiate 2 outstanding terms. The first was that we would be able to select people from that team who would be assigned to work in our concessions, because surely there were a lot of great people who wanted to make sure we got them. The second was that we were allowed to hire 4 managers who would be on our payroll. And those managers would lead the day-to-day operations of the business. So they were essentially Union Square employees. Well, the Mets agreed to this, and then we went and we selected employees, and we trained them, and Danny spoke with them. We did everything we always do for new employees. We hired those managers. And on the opening day, 2009, someone didn't get the memo, because the employees who showed up to work in our concessions we had never seen before, and those employees we trained were scattered all over the stadium. What do we do? How's this possibly going to work? How can we deliver a great customer experience if those employees haven't been trained in how we define a great customer experience? Well, it turns out that those 4 managers created so much enthusiasm and excitement about being part of those concessions. They treated the employees with respect, trusted them, believed in them, and created a work environment where the employees thrived. The managers brought out the best in every one of those team members, and our customer service was the same as it was in any other restaurant of Union Square. And so what we learned from that experience is that the leadership is the most important component. And when you ask the question, how do great teams deliver great customer experiences, the answer really lies there. Accountability is so critical in organizations because if leaders are not upholding the standards over and over again and continually reminding teams of what those standards are, then we see the standards start to creep. Think about it for a moment at home. I have a 17-year-old daughter. She's actually here in the room with me today, and I'm going to embarrass her a little bit right now. When Grace comes out of her room on a Friday night, I'm evaluating the outfit she wants to wear when she goes out with her friends. Now, Grace loves fashion, and she's always got a great outfit on, but every now and then, she's pushing the boundary on what I'm comfortable with. And so when that happens, I have two choices. I can either think, oh, it's Friday night, I just want to go and relax, turn a blind eye, or I can say something, which I know will provoke a conversation or possibly a fight. What do I choose? What do you choose as parents when you're faced with those kinds of conflicts? Well, we all know what happens when we turn the blind eye, right? Next Friday night, she's wearing the same thing or something even more pushing the boundaries on what I'm comfortable with. And if I say something, she'll say, but Mom, you let me wear that last week. That is how the standards start to creep. And if we turn a blind eye week after week, we wake up 2 months later and we're saying, what the heck happened here? The standards have completely changed. This is not what I wanted to see. And at work, when we turn that blind eye and we're not saying something and we're not saying something, we wake up one day with a completely new standard of behavior that is not what we intended at all. The culture of an organization is defined by behavior, the behavior that we tolerate. So whatever behavior you are tolerating is what defines your culture. Whatever behavior you ignore, you condone. You're saying it's okay. You can behave that way. I have 3 seconds left, so if I can share one closing story with you today about the impact that each one of you in this room can have, regardless of your role, regardless of leadership, the impact each one of you can have. I want to share the story with you of Patrick. Patrick was a nurse at one of my clients' locations, a hospital in New York City. This was the orthopedics unit of the hospital. The unit that, I don't know how much you guys have talked to people in different fields of medicine, but I find orthopedics and cardiology always think that they're the best. And that was true here too. They came to a workshop with me and said, we don't need this workshop, we're the best in the hospital. And I said, well, who's the worst in the hospital? And they said, transport. Transport is terrible. When you call transport and ask them to move a patient, they never come. And when they do come, they stand around on their phones and they don't do anything. So I decided to look into this, and I hung around and observed and interviewed people, and I discovered that Patrick was really good at getting transport to come in a heartbeat. So I listened in on some of Patrick's phone calls when he called transport. You can imagine what he did. The phone call would go something like, hey guys, how you doing? What's going on down there? You busy? Really? Oh, I'm sorry. I hate to ask you this when you're already slammed, but I really need to get this patient to MRI. Can you come now? Oh, awesome. And he got transport to come. It was the relationship, right? But even more than that, when Patrick got off the phone, he went into the patient's room, he got their shoes, he got their chart, everything they needed to go to MRI, and he had it all ready so that when transport came in, they could grab the patient and go. I learned through observing that other nurses on the unit were getting off the phone, assuming the worst in transport, that they would never show up, and those nurses might go on break. They weren't there when transport came. Or they might go into another patient's room and not be ready with that patient who needed to be moved. And so what Patrick did so well is he did his job. He got everything ready and made his team members' jobs easier in the process. Before we can point fingers, before we can look at teams and say where those breakdowns are, we really have to look first at those kinds of dynamics and say, are we taking care of each other and making each other's jobs easier? Because only when we're taking care of each other first can we be effective at taking care of our clients. And if you think about it, there's no one in this room who can't be Patrick. There's no one in this room who couldn't get transport to call if you didn't want to. Thank you so much for your time today.